I had known Joe for a good 10 years and spent many hours at his bar, the Landing Strip Lounge, drinking PBRs and lusting after the girls who worked for him. They came and went, but they all had one thing in common. They were hot. The current couple was no exception. Karen behind the bar and both waitresses, Tina and Cookie, made me want to rip off their clothes and possess them. I think this statement is not entirely accurate. If it was true of Karen and Tina, it wasn't quite true of Cookie. As I looked at her, my thoughts went something like this. Why don't I take someone like her as my wife instead of the cunt I'm married to? Not that she wasn't as beautiful as the other two, because she was and more. But if Karen and Tina were pretty damn beautiful, it was in the manner of, I'm beautiful and I know it. In other words, Karen and Tina would be buddies or friends with benefits, while Cookie would be in it for the long haul. But as much as I would have liked to give the meat to any of those three, it wasn't going to happen. It wouldn't happen because of the way I was built. I was one of those guys that really meant it when I said love, and that would be the case until death do us part. And at that moment, it couldn't have been worse. And I had recently found out that my wife was having fun with her boss, and apparently some of our mutual friends knew about it, although I had to wonder if they were really my friends. You'd think real friends would clue you in if they found out your wife was stabbing you in the back. I think they were more Claudia's friends than mine. They certainly weren't on my friends list or my Christmas card list anymore. And I was sitting there sipping my beer and thinking about my whore wife when Bobby Denton lowered himself onto the bar stool next to me. How you doing, Wally? Hanging in there, Bobby. How about you? Same old thing. Are you going to be here tomorrow night? Why? Tomorrow what? Open mic night. We've got some decent talent. Yeah, but I'll have to endure all your lame blonde jokes. I see your wife's face when you tell them and wonder why she hasn't cut your tongue out yet while you're sleeping. I don't sleep next to her. I thought that was odd, but before I could comment, he said, I need to talk to Joe about tomorrow, and got up and left. Karen came over and asked if I was ready for another PBR, and I told her no. I finished the one in front of me, then got up and headed home. When I arrived, Claudia already had dinner ready, and she greeted me with hugs and kisses, which I responded to. Claudia didn't know that I knew about her secret life with her boss, and I didn't want her to find out until I had all my affairs sorted out. Until I did, I still wanted to live a sex life, so I would have to keep what I knew to myself. When I found out what Claudia was up to, I went to a lawyer and found out the harsh truth about divorce in a no-fault state. In short, I would be totally screwed, and Claudia would walk away smiling. According to the lawyer, the only options were to just walk away without divorcing Claudia or letting her know where I went, or to smile, accept it, and live with it. Deal with it and live with it? Easy to say when it's not happening to you. But in the end, I decided to do just that. Live with it until I could get myself in a financial position where I could leave Claudia on my own terms. My terms were that I didn't give her shit and leave Thomas Billings broke and bleeding. Framing her boss would be the easiest thing in the world. All I had to do was let his wife know what he was up to, and if I got her right, she'd clip him under the knees and kick him to the curb. Sarah Billings was Barton Benton's only child, and he loved her dearly, but he was no fool. When his favorite daughter announced her intention to marry Thomas Billings, whom she had met at a company Christmas party, Benton had insisted on a prenuptial agreement that would prevent Billings from gaining control of Benton Industries if anything happened to Benton. Sarah was his sole heiress, and he wanted to make sure she retained control of the Benton fortune. How do I know all this? Claudia worked at Benton Industries as Billings' secretary and was connected to the gossip network. She would bring the gossip home, and it would become table talk at dinner. When Benton and his wife died in a plane crash, his only heiress Sarah found herself at the mercy of the company. She either didn't think she could handle it or she didn't want to handle it, so Thomas Billings, the purchasing manager, suddenly became president of Benton Industries. Sarah may not have wanted to run the company, but she wasn't a dumbass and kept the title of CEO and chairman of the board so she could keep an eye on things. All I had to do regarding Billings was to slip his wife a dime. Claudia followed Billings into the executive offices, but not as his secretary. She was promoted to personal assistant to the president. This promotion both pleased and displeased me at the same time. The extra money pleased me because we had just bought a new house, new furniture, and appliances. What wasn't happy was that the new job required her to travel around the country with Billings as he negotiated new contracts and such. Claudia was gone for 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 times a month. I wanted my wife to be with me instead of flying all over the country, but she was happy in her new job, so I kept quiet and lived with it. That is, I lived with it until Claudia and I went dancing at the Elks Club. We had a great time drinking, dancing, and socializing with friends. About 2 hours after the party started, I needed to go to the bathroom. I was sitting in one of the stalls minding my own business when Brett and Chuck walked in. I knew it was them because I recognized their voices. When Chuck said, "Claudia looks really good today." "I know, and I'd like to get a piece of her." "I don't know if she can take you." "I thought maybe I could get her by threatening to tell Wally what she does on her trips with the boss." "I wouldn't if I were you. Wally is so fixated on that whore, he won't believe you. He might even kick your ass for talking bad about her." Chuck was right. I didn't believe him. I knew my Claudia. She loved me as much as I loved her. My Claudia would never, and I mean never, cheat on me. When I got out of the stall, I had half a mind to go to those two assholes and punch them in the face for what they said about my wife. The other half was saying, "Don't be a fool. You'll only cause a scene and embarrass Claudia." I let reason prevail, went back to the party, and tried to enjoy myself. When the party was over, we went home and got down to it. As we hugged afterwards, I realized that there was no way my wife would cheat on me. Next chapter. It's a funny thing about us humans. We have this thing called human nature, and one of the things human nature makes us do is prove something to ourselves. Somebody says, "You can't do that," and you have to prove that you can. Someone else says, "It's just not possible," and you have to prove that you can. Someone says, "Your wife is cheating on you," and you have to prove that she's not. And the easiest way to prove it? Show up where she is on one of her trips and see for yourself that it's a brazen lie. That's what I did. Billings and Claudia traveled to Houston, and Claudia, as usual, called me to let me know where they were staying. I was on the next flight to Houston. At the front desk, I asked if my wife had checked in, and after showing her ID, I told her she had checked in and was in room 306. I said she was in Houston to meet her cousin and asked if he had checked in. Yes, indeed, Cousin Thomas was staying in room 901. I was already headed for the house phone to call Claudia's room when I happened to glance at the elevators. I saw Claudia and Billings coming out of the elevator, holding hands. They were smiling at each other. They stopped and kissed as the elevator doors closed behind them, then headed for the hotel bar. I'd seen enough to realize what I'd overheard was true, and all I had to do was turn around, go home, and decide what to do. But then human nature intervened. It was telling me, "You need to find out more, Wally." I couldn't just follow them into the bar because they would notice me, so I needed to change my appearance enough to not attract their attention. I went into the hotel gift store. There was a lot of Houston Astro merchandise there, and I bought a baseball cap, a windbreaker, and a canvas bag with the team logo on it, as well as a pair of cheap sunglasses. I picked up a copy of People magazine and then headed to the public restroom. The suit and tie went in the bag. I whipped the lenses out of my horn-rimmed glasses, put on my cap and windbreaker, and headed to the bar. True, the disguise was a little thin and wouldn't stand up to close scrutiny, but I didn't expect Claudia or Billings to be scrutinizing anyone. They certainly hadn't expected to see me in Houston, and judging by the way they held hands and kissed in public, I highly doubted they were thinking about private investigators or detectives. I spotted them when I walked into the bar. They were sitting in a booth, drinks in front of them, and they were making out. I took a table so I could see them, ordered a drink, and then sat at the table, sipping my drink and pretending to read a magazine. They had 2 drinks each, played kissy face for a while, and after about half an hour, they got up and left the bar. They walked past me and didn't even look at me. I waited a minute, and then got up and followed them. I watched them walk hand in hand to the elevator, pressing the call button. They stepped into the elevator, the door closed, and the elevator went up. It didn't stop at the third floor, so Claudia could get off and go to her room. It reached the ninth, stopped for a minute, and then headed down. On the way down, he didn't stop on the third either. I looked up and headed for home. Next chapter. I met with the lawyer, got the bad news, and sprang into action to put an end to my and Claudia's relationship. When I got home from work on Wednesday, I didn't bother to stop by the house. Claudia called me and told me that the Billings had a meeting in Detroit in the morning, so they would fly there from Houston, but she would be home the next day. I walked into the landing strip for a beer or three and to see if Bobby was right when he told me they had some pretty decent talent assembled for the evening. I sat down on a bar stool, ordered my usual PBR, and made myself comfortable. As usual, Bobby started the evening off with a blonde joke. Two blondes were riding in an elevator. Long before they got to their floor, the elevator stopped and a very good-looking guy got in. He smiled at the blondes, held out his hand, and pressed the button for the next floor. Then he stood and admired the scenery as the elevator went up. When the door opened behind him, he smiled at the blondes, turned and walked out the door. As he turned to leave, the blondes saw the many flakes of dandruff on his back. The first blonde turned to the second blonde and said, "You." The second blonde replied, "It's okay. If I can get him home, I'll give him a head and shoulders." The first blonde looked at the second blonde and asked, "How do you do, shoulders?" Bobby elicited a friendly laugh from everyone except his wife. She just sat at her table in the back and threw dirty looks at him. He stepped forward and introduced the next aspiring stand-up comedian. The guy who came on stage looked around the crowd and said, "Two boys were arguing when a teacher walked into the room. The teacher asked them why they were arguing, and the first boy said, 'We found a $10 bill and decided to give it to the one who could tell the biggest lie.' 'You should be ashamed,' the teacher said. 'When I was your age, I didn't even know what a lie was.'" The two boys looked at each other, nodded, and handed the $10 to the teacher. He laughed politely and then continued, "A man goes to the doctor and says, 'Doctor, everywhere I touch, everything hurts.' The doctor asked him what he meant, and the man replied, 'When I touch my shoulder, it hurts. When I touch my knee, it hurts. And when I touch my forehead, it really hurts.'" The doctor shook his head understandingly and said, "I know exactly what the problem is. You broke your finger." He wasn't that funny, so I sipped my beer and scanned the crowd. For no reason, just people watching, when Cookie took the seat next to me. "Hey, handsome, buy a poor working girl a drink?" I got Karen's attention and pointed to Cookie. Karen nodded, and a moment later placed a screwdriver in front of Cookie. "And to what does Wally owe the pleasure of your company?" "Nothing, just curious." "Curious? Curious about what?" "About you?" "Me? You can't be serious." "Why not? You're a good-looking and nice guy." "Nice? Me?" "Yes, you are. You come here a lot, and I can tell by the way you look at Karen, Tina, and me that you like what you see. But you're not like a lot of others who come here. You keep your hands to yourself and don't make lewd or suggestive comments. The question is, why haven't you hit on any of us yet?" "You know why, Cookie? I'm married." "Why?" "Why what?" "Why are you married to that tramp? Surely you must know she's cheating on you." This caught me off guard, and Cookie caught the look on my face. "You didn't know? How could you not know? Everyone else knows." "How do you know?" She pointed her finger and said, "See that guy over there sitting in the corner booth with the redhead? That's my brother Rick. He works at Benton's. Everybody there knows about your wife and Billings. Rick came in here one day and saw you sitting here, and I was talking to you. He told me later that he felt sorry for you, and when I asked him why, he told me. What I can't understand is why, if everyone knows, no one bothered to let me know." "I don't know. Maybe for a variety of reasons." "Name a few." "There are so-called open marriages these days. There are those who like you too much to hurt you, and there are those who may be the other side of the coin, and don't like you enough to be happy about it happening to you. There may be people who like you but like your wife more. She finished with the screwdriver and said, "Break's over. You need to get your ass back to work." I looked at that ass as she left and wondered if she'd accept a date when I got rid of Claudia. On the bandstand, Bobby said that now it was time for those who wanted to try, and a voice from deep in the audience said, "I'd like to give it a try." Everyone in the audience, including Bobby, was surprised to see his blonde wife Brianna stand up and head toward the stage. Bobby looked stunned as he handed the microphone to his wife. "I know my douchebag husband likes to tell blonde jokes while looking right at me, but did you notice that Bobby is blonde too? Time for a little payback, dear hubby." An Irishman, a Mexican, and a blonde were doing construction work on scaffolding on the 20th floor of a building. They were having lunch, and the Irishman said, "Corned beef and cabbage. If I ever get corned beef and cabbage for lunch again, I'm going to jump off this building." The Mexican opened his lunchbox again and exclaimed, "Burritos again. If I get any more burritos, I'm going to jump too." The blonde man opened his lunch and said, "Bologna again. If I get another bologna sandwich, I'll jump too." The next day, the Irishman opened his lunch, saw corned beef and cabbage, and jumped to his death. The Mexican opened his lunch, saw the burrito, and jumped off the scaffold. The blonde man opened his lunch, saw the bologna again, and jumped to his death as well. At the funeral, the Irishman's wife wept. She said, "If I had known how much he was tired of corned beef and cabbage, I would never have given it to him again." The Mexican's wife also wept and said, "I could have given him tacos or enchiladas. I didn't realize he hated burritos so much." Everyone turned and looked at the blonde man's wife, and she said, "Don't look at me. He packed his own lunch." She laughed really hard and said, "What do you call a blonde man with an IQ of 35? Gifted." "Why don't blondes eat more M&M candy? They're hard to peel." Today, what's the difference between a blonde and government bonds? Bonds mature. And last, but by no means least, what do blondes and beer bottles have in common? They're both empty from the neck up. Brianna received a standing ovation from the women in the audience and their male companions who wanted to stay in favor of their ladies. Usually, when the comedian finished his act, Bobby would show up, take the microphone, and ask if anyone else wanted to try. If no one wanted to try, Bobby would tell another blonde joke or two, thank everyone for coming, and wish everyone a good night. That didn't happen this time. When Bobby still didn't come up, Brianna put the microphone on the floor and went back to the table she shared with her friends. Finally, Bobby came up to the bandstand again. Leaning over to pick up the microphone, he muttered, "Bitch," not realizing that the microphone was sensitive enough to pick it up. There was silence in the crowd, and when Bobby lifted the microphone to his mouth and said, "That's it for tonight, folks," there was none of the usual cheers and applause. I got up and went home. For the next 3 months, I pretended to be a loving husband to a woman who pretended to be a loving wife. I received a few commissions and one bonus check, which I cashed and then hid the money in a safe that Claudia didn't know about. It wasn't a very large sum, about $10,000, and it wasn't enough to feed me after my divorce when I had to give away half of everything I had. And then the gods smiled on me. Like so many other people, I bought lottery tickets, crossed my fingers, and started dreaming. I got lucky and bought the winning Powerball ticket. I had 4 numbers matched, there was a Powerball and a power play, so the ticket earned me $40,000 before taxes. In the end, when I cashed it in, it would have brought me about $28,200. It wouldn't make me rich, but it would be enough to start a new life after Claudia. I had 6 months to cash it in, so I needed to get the divorce finalized in time for it to be final before I got the money, or it would end up in the estate that we would split between us. The timing was right. Claudia had just gotten a promotion, and her salary was a little more than mine, so there would be no alimony. I would have to pay court costs, and there was no way around that unless I somehow got Claudia to file, and I didn't see that happening. The biggest problem, it seemed to me, was that Claudia could contest the divorce. In that case, she could drag the case out until the ticket had to be filed, and then it would become just another of our assets to be included in the 50-50 split. I had to find a way to make Claudia not want to fight. For all I knew, she wouldn't want to anyway, but I needed some way to make sure she didn't. The thing about no-fault divorces was that you could file a lawsuit citing infidelity, but it didn't matter. Even if I filed a claim of infidelity, Claudia could laugh at me and tell me that I had no proof, that it was all just my imagination, and we needed to go through marriage counseling to figure out where my insecurity came from and then address it. The thing was, I had no proof. Saying, "Come on," everyone knows wasn't proof, nor was seeing them holding hands and kissing. I needed hard audio and video evidence to assert this. Evidence that I could dump on the table in front of Claudia so she would realize that she had indeed been divorced and that she was wasting her time trying to fight for us to stay together. I didn't have that kind of proof, and after talking to a couple of private detective agencies, I realized that I couldn't afford to get the proof I needed if I went that route. As I sat in my doctor's waiting room, a woman wheeled an elderly man in a wheelchair into the office. When she approached the front desk, the man was sitting there alone and silent. Just when I thought I should make small talk with him, a little boy slid off his mother's lap and walked over to the wheelchair. Putting his hand on the old man's arm, he said, "I know how you feel. My mom makes me ride in the wheelchair too." The lady, whose name was Maria, had a good laugh at this and continued, "Working as a pediatric nurse, I have the difficult job of giving children immunizations. One day I went into the ward to give 4-year-old Lizzie a shot. When she saw the needle, she screamed, 'No, no, 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 no!' Her mom scolded her and said, 'Lizzie, that's not good behavior.' Then Lizzie screamed even louder, 'No, thank you, no, thank you.' This elicited polite laughter, and she ended by saying, 'I was on a bike ride with my 8-year-old granddaughter, Carolyn. I made a little wish.' 10 years later, I told her, 'You're going to want to be with your friends and not out walking, biking, and swimming with me like you do now.' Carolyn shrugged. 'In 10 years, you'll be too old to do all those things anyway.' It was open mic night at the Strip again, and I had a drink or two before heading to Claudia's house. She was out of town again. Cookie sat down on the stool next to me and handed me the usual, "buy a poor working girl a drink." She seemed to do this every time I came in. I smiled and waved at Karen, and she came over with Cookie's drink in her hand. We seemed to be getting into a familiar rut. "You're kind of quiet today, Wally. You don't seem like you're enjoying yourself." "I've got a lot on my mind, Cook." "About what, for instance?" I was just in the right mood to dump it all on her. "It doesn't seem like such a big deal to me. So what if you can't afford it? Just find someone who can afford it." "What?" "You said you don't think his wife knows, so go tell her. Have her set the dogs on those two cheaters. She'll catch them, divorce his ass, and call your wife hubby's girlfriend. The whole thing will go public and won't cost you a dime." I laughed, grabbed her, and kissed her. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," and kissed her again. She laughed and said, "Once you get rid of that bitch, we can do it again." "There's something to look forward to," I said, got up and left the bar. The next day I called Sarah Billings, reminded her who I was, and then asked if I could talk to her. She asked what about, and I said it was about a situation that concerned both of us and was too sensitive to discuss over the phone. She agreed to meet me for lunch at Tricacci's restaurant at noon. I arrived 10 minutes early, told Jared I was expecting a guest and described her, then took a booth at the back of the room. Mrs. Billings arrived at 12 sharp and, settling into the booth across from me, got right down to business. "What is this situation you want to talk about?" As I waited for her to arrive, I pondered how best to broach the subject and still had no clear idea until she sat down at the table. Her direct approach solved everything for me. I got straight to the point. "Your husband and my wife are having an affair. A rather lengthy one, I'm afraid." "You can't be serious." "I'm afraid I most certainly am." "Do you have any proof?" "Only what I have seen with my own eyes." "You actually saw them?" "Not the act itself, but I saw enough to convince myself." "I don't understand." You saw them, but you didn't see them. I explained how I found out what they were doing, how I went to Houston, and what I saw there. I admit it's not something the court would accept as evidence, but I have no doubt, not the slightest, about what happened after they got off the elevator on the ninth floor. I wouldn't have any doubt either if I'd seen it. What are you going to do? Divorce her as soon as I can. Thank you very much for letting me know that. I have two reasons for telling you what has been going on. The first is that I really thought you should know. And the second? Mostly for selfish reasons. The divorce will go much faster if Claudia doesn't fight it, but I think in the absence of hard evidence she'll contest it. The problem is that I don't have hard evidence. I've considered hiring a private investigator to get me that evidence, but I've come to the conclusion that there's no way I can afford it. But you can. I hope you'll want to get the evidence you need to get rid of this cheating asshole, and then as a token of your appreciation for me figuring you out, share that evidence with me. She gave me a thoughtful look, then said, and then, as revenge, you'll offer to entertain them and then let them know we'll rub their noses in it. At this, I laughed and said, be serious, Mrs. Billings. There's no way you can make anyone believe that a woman like you would get into bed with a guy like me. Not even to get back at her husband. Besides, if we do this and let them know, it'll undermine what I'm trying to accomplish. It'll give Claudia something she can use to countersue, and the divorce will end up dragging on. I want to get rid of this cheating woman as soon as possible. I think it's going to affect me too. Okay, we'll just chalk it up as a what could have been and move on with our lives. We exchanged cell phone numbers and parted ways. When I arrived, Claudia was home, and over dinner we talked about how our day had gone. We were both still playing the role of loving spouses, so we settled down on the couch and watched TV until bedtime, and then went to bed. I don't know if Claudia considered it lovemaking or not. Tuesday repeated Monday, and I expected Wednesday to repeat both Monday and Tuesday. But at noon on Wednesday, I got a call from Claudia saying that she and her boss needed to be in Detroit Thursday morning, so they were flying in at 4 p.m., and she wouldn't be home that evening. So I did what I used to do when Claudia was gone on Wednesdays and went into the landing strip. I was working late and, as a consequence, got there after open mic night had already started, so I missed the blonde Bobby jokes. Karen brought me a PBR, and I turned my attention to the bandstand. I looked over to the table where his wife usually sat and saw that she wasn't there. As far as I could remember, she never missed open mic nights, and I wondered if what had happened the previous Wednesday had something to do with that. The guy standing there was a regular, but I'd never seen him get up on stage before. The economy is so bad. CEOs are now playing miniature golf. Hot Wheels and Matchbox shares are trading higher than GM. McDonald's is selling a quarter of an owner. Parents in Beverly Hills have fired their nannies and are forced to learn their kids' names. A truckload of Americans hit Mexico. Motel 6 leaves no lights on. And finally, the mafia fires the judges. I laughed politely, and then I heard, buy the poor working man a drink, and turned to see Cookie had taken the stool next to me. It went on, and before I could say a word, Karen was already setting the drink in front of Cookie. I was surprised as hell when I grabbed her and kissed her hard. Shit. Why all of a sudden? I took your advice and contacted Sarah Billings. She didn't know her dear hubby was spreading pollen behind her back. I'm sure she's going to make inquiries about him, but I'm not sure she'll share what she finds out with me. It doesn't matter, though. Like you said, when she divorces him, it will become public and I can take advantage of that. And all I'll get for that advice is a kiss? What would you want instead? Ask me again when your divorce is final. I looked at her for a long moment, then said, count on it. She smiled, finished her drink, and went back to work. When I got home from work on Thursday, Claudia was home and dinner was almost ready. When I walked in, she asked, dinner first or dessert? Dinner first. If I start with dessert, we may never get to dinner, and it would be a shame to throw it away. I remember how you always pick dessert first. And I remember when you weren't a cheating whore, I thought, as my mouth said, I was much younger then, and didn't realize I needed food to keep my strength and stamina up. After dinner, we settled down on the couch and watched TV before heading to bed. The next week went by without traveling, but Claudia worked late and had to go out for a half day on Saturday. Sarah Billings called me on Tuesday and asked me to meet her for lunch at Tricacci's. When I arrived, she was already there and sitting in a booth on the back row. There was a large envelope on the table in front of her, and she slid it toward me as I sat down. This is everything you could ask for and more. You already know she's cheating on you, so if I were you, I wouldn't look at the discs. The images will probably stay in your memory. I know they're in my head. He's in for a big surprise when I deliver it. My investigator found out that Dear Thomas rented the apartment to use as a love nest. If he'd registered it in his own name, my investigator wouldn't have had the legal right to set up audio and video surveillance there. What he screwed up was that instead of putting it in his name, he billed the company. Since he billed the company and I am an employee of the company, I could authorize it, which I did. Let me guess. Tuesday and Thursday when Claudia told me she had to work late, and Saturday when she told me she had to go to work half a day. You guessed it, and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are long lunches. I'm surprised they didn't do anything on Sunday to make the week perfect. It was our wedding anniversary on Sunday, and he couldn't get away. Now that you have proof, what are you going to do? I'm going to hire a lawyer and file for divorce. Use mine. He's already prepared all the paperwork. I plan on hubby getting a subpoena at work just before I demote him to the position he held before I married him. If we do it right, we can file at the same time. Give me your lawyer's number and I'll call him as soon as I get back to the office. That's what I thought, so I told him to expect your call. One more thing. Because of some of the things that were said after they finished their cases, I'm going to serve him with a protective order at the same time he gets the divorce papers. You might want to think about doing the same. Why? What was said? They talked about how it would be so much easier for them if you and I were no longer together. Tom said that if I died, the prenup would be null and void and he would be out. Your wife laughed and said that if you died, it would only bring her $100,000. $200,000 if your death was accidental, and then asked if he had any idea how they could do that, and he said it was something to think about. I could tell by the tone of their voices that they were just joking, but it gave me another reason to beat him up. My problem is that I don't think I could stand in front of a judge at a plea hearing and say, I fear for my life, without laughing. She was lying anyway. I only have $25,000 in life insurance, but I agree with you so I'd have something to hit her with. Do you have a vacation? 3 weeks. Why? I thought the day after I demote Tommy, I might appoint you as the new president of the company. Of course, it'll only be a sham, but think how he'll take it that the husband of the woman he's been having fun with is going to be his new boss. He'll be furious. You could even pretend to build a case against him to get him fired. Why don't you just fire him instead of demoting him? He'll probably sue the company for wrongful dismissal. What kind of unfair dismissal? The apartment he's paying for with company money is misappropriation of company funds for personal use. His affair with a married female employee under his direct supervision opens the company up to a harassment suit if he gets tired of Claudia and kicks her to the curb, and she gets angry enough to try to get back at him. All this plus the fact that he's cheating on you shows that he can't be trusted, and you can't have your company run by a man who won't rust. Take all of this to your attorney and see what he says. The minus side of that argument is that you'll have to keep Claudia, even though you probably want to tear her hair out by the roots. Why would I want to do that? Keep her, I mean. Because of the harassment. All she has to do is say your husband told her he'd fire her and give her a bad reference if she didn't agree. You'll keep her, give her a small raise, and promote her to the shittiest job in the place. And after a while, she'll get sick of the shitty job and quit. I looked at my watch. I need to get back to work. Thank you for this, I said, picked up the envelope in front of me and stood up. What about my idea of making you president for a few weeks? It won't work if you fire him and he's not present for it. Maybe I just want to keep you around to get to know you better. We can talk about that when we have more time. You have my number? Call me. As I drove to work, I thought about what she said about wanting to get to know me better. I would call her, but only to discuss the divorce and the timing of when our estranged spouses would be suing. How do you get to know each other? No. She was steak, lobster, and champagne, and I was Diet Coke, burger, and fries. It just wouldn't work. Back at the office, I called the lawyer whose number she had given me and found that he was fully expecting my call. We talked, and he told me that all the paperwork was ready, and he would just need to copy it and put my details where Sarah's were. He gave me a price, and I gave him my credit card number. He said the papers would be ready to sign the next day, and I arranged to meet him at 4 o'clock to sign the papers. When I went to bed, Claudia kissed me and murmured, "I love you," and fell asleep. I lay staring at the ceiling and wondered if she really meant it, and if she did, why she was cheating on me. Those thoughts never left me as I dozed off. At 4 o'clock, I entered the office of Dewey, Cheatham and Howe and was ushered into Stanley Howe's office. I was surprised to see Sarah there, and it turned out that signing my papers was only part of the reason I was there. It was also a strategy planning session. The issue was when to file for spouses who are contemplating divorce. Because of my lottery ticket deadline, I wanted to do it as early as yesterday, but Sarah wanted to wait for the right time. In her opinion, the right time was when the couple was on one of their trips. She imagined them stepping hand in hand out of the elevator at the hotel where they were staying. I kept pushing for immediate service, and finally Sarah asked, "Why is it so important that you can't wait a week or two?" I opened my mouth to tell her that, and just as quickly closed it. I wasn't a lawyer and didn't know the law, and I could be wrong, but it could be that hiding assets was against some law, and my lawyer wouldn't let me do it. "It's just important to me," is all I said. The meeting ended with the case being adjourned while Sarah figured out when Shithead and Claudia would be hitting the road again. And there was a coffee shop on the first floor of the building, and as we were getting off the elevator, Sarah asked me to have a cup of coffee with her. We got our coffees and sat down at a table. Sarah took a sip of her coffee and then said, "Okay, Wally, spill it out." "Spill what?" "It was obvious that you were going to tell us why you were in such a hurry to get to your wife's service, but then suddenly decided not to. So tell us what's going on." I told her about the ticket, the ransom date, and why I had suddenly decided not to report it to Howe. She laughed and said, "No problem, Wally. Just give me the ticket. I'll buy it from you and cash it." "I can't do that." "Why not? Think about why you approached me in the first place. You couldn't afford to hire a private investigator, and I can. You knew I could because I'm rich. I'm still rich, Wally, and what good is wealth if you can't use it to get what you want? I want Tommy to be served the way I described in Howe's office. To get what I want, I will use my wealth. Besides, you'll be in the winnings if I buy your ticket." "How's that?" "I'll give you 40 in cash, and you can put it in a safe or in your mattress, and you won't pay any state or federal taxes on it." "But you'll end up paying taxes." "So? I'll give the ticket to my accountant, and by the time the taxes are paid, it will have disappeared into the general population and won't amount to a dime. Once again, Wally, I'm just using my wealth to get what I want." I only shrugged my shoulders and agreed. I don't know how she did it, but 2 days later she gave me 40,000 in cash and I put it in my safety deposit box. Sarah got what she wanted and everything happened just as she had envisioned. Claudia and Shithead stepped off the elevator in the lobby of the Atlanta Marriott Hotel, smiling and holding hands. The smiles disappeared when a pretty blonde woman chewing gum walked up to them and handed them each an envelope, then informed them that they had been served. Claudia looked at the envelope in her hand and cried. Shithead looked at his face and his face turned ugly. He tried to rip the envelope in half but couldn't because it was too thick. He threw it on the floor and kicked it with his foot, and it slid across the floor into the elevator just as the door closed. Claudia collapsed into one of the chairs in the lobby and sobbed into her hands. Shithead looked at her in disgust and left for the bar. After a few minutes, Claudia pulled her cell phone out of her purse and spent the next 10 minutes trying to call. When there was no answer, she finally gave up, threw the phone on the floor, and started crying again. Believe it or not, When I turned off the CD player and pulled out the disc, I felt sad at the sight of the video Sarah had made. I loved Claudia and still have feelings for her. Seeing her suffer made me sad. But my feelings for her weren't strong enough to survive what she was doing to that bastard. I remembered that morning when she'd been served, remembered all the calls she'd made that I'd ignored. I wondered what she could say that would make a difference. When she got home, she found that I had changed the locks and couldn't get in. I let her ring the doorbell and banged on it for 15 minutes before I opened the door. Said, "You didn't read all the papers in the envelope you were handed? Have you not read the order of protection that requires you to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my home, my place of employment, and any other place I may be? Leave now before I call the police and they come and arrest you." "You can't do that to me, Wally. This is my house, too." "Then the judge who signed the order doesn't think so, Claudia. Now get out before I call the police." "Damn it, Wally, you have to let me talk to you. You have to let me explain." "No, Claudia. That incident with the cotton you gave me said it all." And I slammed the door in her face. Of course, that was a lie. She hadn't given me the social disease, but she didn't know that. And I hoped the thought that she had would torment her until she took the test herself. 5 minutes later, she was still banging on the door, and I called the police. A car arrived with 2 officers. I showed them my ID, and they told Claudia she had to leave. She tried to argue with them until they finally told her to leave and stay away or they would arrest her. She threw a disapproving look at the house and then left. I waited 2 days and then called her and told her I would meet her at Barney's Tavern and let her talk. We met and I got the crap I expected. She did it for us. She did it because the money would help pay off our debts, and once that was done, she planned to leave. She only loved me, and with Billings it was just sex, and it wasn't great. I was much better than that. We were able to get through it because we loved each other. Just give her a chance. I listened to her and then gave my opinion. Just sign the papers and send them to Claudia. You sign, and all the videos of you and that bastard doing business will never get to family and friends. You'll never have your own internet site, and they'll never show up on any of the thousands of amateur sites I could send copies to. Just subscribe and let it be Claudia. After watching the video of you and your lover, those scenes are imprinted in my mind, and they will never go away as long as you're around to remind me. It's over between us, Claudia. Accept that and move on with your life. Damn it, Wally, I don't want a divorce. I love you. Then you never should have started cheating on me. Now you're used and spoiled goods, and I want nothing more to do with you. Consider yourself lucky. At least you still have a job, which is more than can be said for a guy lover. I stood up and left her sitting, and smiled, knowing that when she got ready to leave, she'd find out I hadn't paid the check, and she'd stay with it. Next chapter. Sarah called me 3 days later and asked me to meet her for lunch. We met at Tricacci's restaurant, and after Mandy took our order, she filled me in on what happened after Shitcrat was served. Apparently, he never found the envelope he threw in the elevator, so he never got to read the protective order. When he got home, he couldn't get in because Sarah had changed the locks. He started pounding on the front door, kicking it with his feet and yelling to Sarah, "Get your ass over here and open the damn door!" He apparently didn't notice a car parked outside with Avery Security Service written on the door. 2 men got out of the car, approached him, and politely asked him to leave. He told them to die and get off his property. One of the men told Shithead that they had been hired to guard the property and to see that he obeyed a security order instructing him to stay 500 feet away from the house and Mrs. Billings. Shithead again berated them and again told them to get off his property, and when they didn't move from the spot, shoved one of them. When he regained consciousness after being tasered, he found that the 2 guards had been replaced by 2 police officers, and he was handcuffed. When he left the prison and went to work, he was stopped by 2 guards who told him that they had been ordered not to let him enter the building beyond the lobby. One of the guards picked up the phone and made a call, and 3 minutes later, the human resources manager showed up and informed the asshole that he was fired for embezzling company funds and violating the morals section of the company's policy and procedure manual. "You can't do that to me, asshole. You seem to forget that I run this place. He ranted and raged, and when he wouldn't leave, the HR person called the police. They arrived, and the asshole went to jail for violating a protective order for the second time. He didn't know Sarah was in the building, so when he was brought before the judge, the same one as the first time, he was able to fight off the charge because there was no way he could have known Sarah was there. She didn't have an office in the building, and she wasn't one of the regular employees, so he had no reason to think she might be there. The judge agreed and let him go free. But he was humiliated to be led out of the building in handcuffs in front of the people over whom he had once been supervisor. One of them was Claudia. Sarah, as chairman of the board, took over as president and informed Claudia that she didn't need a personal assistant and that Claudia was to work in the secretariat until another position could be found for her. She would keep her salary and all other benefits she had acquired as personal assistant. And then Sarah told her that she really wanted to fire Claudia, and the only reason she didn't was because I talked her out of it. Sarah told me that Claudia seemed stunned that Sarah even knew me, let alone had any contact with me. A day later, she called Claudia into her office and told her that she was being promoted to office manager and sent to a plant that was 30 miles away. She then told Claudia that she was getting a 10% pay raise so that she would make as much as I did, maybe even a little more, so that I wouldn't have to pay child support. At the end of the meeting, she told Claudia that once our divorces were final, she intended to gouge my eyes out in gratitude for my informing her that her husband was cheating on her. Sarah told me that Claudia left the meeting with a shocked look and shaking her head. And Claudia must have believed me when I told her what might happen with the videotapes I had because she didn't fight the divorce. It was a standard 50-50 arrangement, and all it cost me, besides Claudia, was the loss of the house. It had to be sold and the proceeds divided. We hadn't lived in it that long, so there wasn't much equity, but I got enough to put a down payment on an apartment and move in. Claudia rented an apartment near her new job. She still calls me at least once a week and asks me to give her another chance. I always reply, "Thanks for the offer, but you're welcome." The day after the divorce was final, Sarah called me and asked when the divorce was final. Yesterday. My final one is today. Do you have any plans for tomorrow? No, I don't have any plans. You do now. Pick me up at 6 outside my office. We'll celebrate freedom with dinner, drinks, and dancing. I hadn't entertained since the last time I'd been with Claudia, and Sarah was a very attractive woman, so I said, 6 is a yes. See you then, she said, and broke the connection. Sarah looked gorgeous when I picked her up at 6. I asked you to pick me up at work because there are some people there who have stayed on good terms with Tommy, and I think they'll let him know that you and I are together. The same people will probably let your ex know as well. The conversation over dinner was general in nature, Sarah telling me how things were going since she took over the company. She loved it and regretted not stepping in when her father passed away. I told her about how my work was going and about the apartment I bought when the house was sold. After dinner, we went to the Purple Onion for drinks and dancing. It was a damn good thing the next day was Saturday, and I didn't have to work, so we came home and got down to it. On Saturday, Sarah and I got up late and went to Pegasus for brunch, and then went to my place and did it again Friday night, and then back to her place again on Sunday. I couldn't spend Sunday night at Sarah's because I had to go home and get the clothes I had to wear to work. It also didn't hurt that I was able to get some rest. Next chapter. For the next 2 months, Sarah and I saw each other 2 or 3 times a week and on weekends. Then, on a Friday night when we were spending the weekend at my house, she told me that this weekend would be our last. I've loved every minute we've spent together, but I don't love you. And to be honest, you don't love me either. We're good friends with great benefits, but that's all there is and will be. I really wish it could go on, but something has happened that makes it impossible. Is it something I did? I guess in a way you could say yes. Would you care to explain it to me? You divorced your wife, so yes, we can say it's something you did. That's clear as mud. Turns out your ex is an above-average office manager, and my office manager at corporate headquarters filed a notice. Her husband has been transferred to his company's Los Angeles office. I'm going to move your ex from where she is now to my office, and it would be too awkward to work with her while I'm playing with you, especially since I have no doubt she knows about us. That was one of the reasons we started, right? To thumb our noses at our exes? Isn't that a reason to beat everyone up? She messed up my life when we were married, and now she's messing up my life when we're not married. I guess I'd better make the most of our last 3 days. And I picked her up in my arms and carried her into the bedroom. Sunday, we tearfully said goodbye, and Monday morning I embarked on the next phase of my life as a single guy looking for love. Next chapter. I spent most of Monday and Tuesday in a mild despondency over the loss of Sarah, but by Wednesday I was in a decent mood. Because of all the evenings spent with Sarah, I hadn't been to Landing Strip in a month and a half. No sooner had I put my ass down on the bar stool than Karen showed up with my PBR and sat down on the bar in front of me. "Welcome back, stranger." "Good to be back, lady. Would I be lucky enough to get you to agree to go out with me tonight?" "You know I don't date clients. So go on a date with me and I'll stop coming here." "What? And lose the tips you leave?" "No way, Wally, no way. But play your cards right, and there's a young lady here who might see her way clear to give you a chance." And she removed herself to take care of another customer. I had already half finished my beer when Bobby took the seat next to me. "Where have you been, Wally? Was the talent so bad that it chased you away?" "Not at all. Just had better things to do." "I can understand that. I saw you with more important things to do at the Alhambra a week or so ago. It's good to see you again." He got up to have a word with the other attendees and then went up to the stage, welcomed everyone to another open mic night, and began with the expected blonde joke. A blonde woman buys a thermos. She brings it to work to show her friends. One of her friends, also blonde, asks, "What does it do?" The first blonde replies, "It keeps warm things warm and cold things cold." The friend asks, "What do you have in it right now?" "A cup of coffee and 2 ice creams." Then the first aspiring comedian was brought out. He turned out to be the guy from the day shift counter at the Mavericks where I filled up in the mornings. My mom lives in Newark, and I haven't seen her in a couple years, but we talk on the phone at least once a week. Yesterday we talked, and as I hung up the phone, I thought about my mom and came up with 10 reasons I owe my mom. My mom taught me the value of a job well done. If you're going to kill each other, do it outside. I just finished cleaning. Mom taught me religion. You better pray it comes out of the carpet. My mom taught me time travel. If you don't straighten up, I'll send you to the middle of next week. My mom taught me logic. Because I said so, that's why. My mom taught me foresight. Make sure you wear clean underwear in case you have an accident. Mom taught me irony. Keep crying and I'll give you an excuse to cry. Mom taught me the science of osmosis. Shut your mouth and eat your dinner. Mommy taught me acrobatics. Look at that dirt on your neck. Mom taught me stamina. You're going to sit there until all that spinach is gone. But most of all, Mom taught me patience. Just wait until your dad gets home. I had to laugh at that because I remembered hearing most of those words from my mom myself, and judging by the laughter, it must have struck a chord with everyone in the crowd as well. In the middle of the performance, someone sat down on the stool next to me, and I heard the familiar, "Buy the poor working girl a drink?" As usual, the words were no sooner out of her mouth than Karen was already placing a drink on the bar in front of her. "Remember what I said about Wally's cards," she said to me before leaving to take care of another customer. "What did she mean?" Cookie asked. "I think she meant that since I'm divorced, I should ask you out." "Well? What? Are you going to do that?" "What are my chances of you saying yes?" "I don't know until you ask." "Would you like to have dinner with me on your next night off?" "No." "I guess that answers my question about the odds." "No, it doesn't." "You're losing me, girl. I'm getting some mixed messages." "No, I can't have dinner with you on my next day off, but I'm free the second day." "And when will that be?" "Tuesday." "Okay, let me try again. Would you like to have dinner with me next Tuesday?" "Yes, I would." She picked up a bar napkin, wrote on it, and held it out to me. Give me a call so we can set it up. I gotta go. And she got up and went back to work. Since I had just finished my third mug of beer, I decided it was time for me to go. I was at Cookie's door at 6 on Tuesday, and as I pressed the doorbell, I pondered where the next chapter of my life would take me. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video. It's gotta be a prank. A poorly thought out evil prank? But who would do such a thing? Who would risk ruining a good marriage just for laughs? That's what I was left with after that first phone call. It all started 6 months ago as I sat in my office at Apex Office Integrators waiting for a 2-hour conference call on a Wednesday afternoon. I am a project manager at Apex and am responsible for 3 or more network integration projects at any given time. This meant that I spent a lot of time on the phone during the conference calls to get updates on my projects or to deal with issues and put out fires. It was only 1:30 p.m., and I was sitting online looking at a digital camera I wanted to buy when my phone rang. I reached out and picked it up without taking my eyes off the computer screen. Hello, Apex Office Integrators. This is Mike Fulton speaking. Are you Mike Fulton? The female caller asked. Yes, how can I help you? I don't think you can help me, but I hope I can help you, she said. Help me? How? Is your wife's name Brenda? Yes. Does she have a good friend named Kara? She asked. Yes, I replied suspiciously. What's the matter? I just wanted to warn you that if you don't take action soon, your wife is having an affair. What? Who's that? This is some kind of joke because it's not funny, I said. Her statement sounded so unexpected that I didn't know how to react to it. Should I just laugh at her or get angry? Or maybe I should just hang up the phone. I can't tell you who I am. I just wanted to give you a chance to prevent it before it happened. I knew my wife and I knew she would never cheat on me, so this call had to be some kind of joke. But who would make such a cruel joke? If I believed what this woman was telling me, I would have been very hurt and angry. Why would anyone want to put me through such an ordeal? I wondered if the caller knew it was a joke, or was she just doing what someone else asked or told her to do? As much as I wanted to hang up, I decided to wait and play along, at least for a while, to try to figure out who was behind the prank. What makes you think my wife is going to have an affair? I asked as calmly as possible. I've heard them talking about it. You heard who and what they were talking about? I asked. I think your wife and her friends Kara and Francis. They go to lunch at a place called Vinny's every Wednesday and sit at the same table, right by the door in front of the windows. I go there for lunch on Wednesdays too and sit at the table next to them. Eating alone is boring, so I try to eavesdrop on other people's conversations to entertain myself, she said. Kara was Brenda's best friend, and they have been friends since college. We all went to the same college, and I met them at the same party. Kara had already been dating her husband John for over a year when I started dating Brenda. We have remained close friends ever since. Francis's name was unfamiliar to me. I didn't remember Brenda ever mentioning anyone named Francis. Ta-da! And you've heard that my wife is planning to have an affair? I asked. Not exactly. Let me explain. Your wife's friend Kara has been telling your wife about the affairs she's had over the past couple years and how exciting they are. She was also trying to talk Brenda into having an affair. She was telling your wife that an affair would not only be exciting, but would also make sex with you more interesting. So far, your wife has refused, but over the past few weeks I've noticed that her objections to Kara's suggestions have become less forceful. She's even started asking questions and generally showing more interest in the subject than she did at first. I just think you need to do something to stop this before it goes too far, she said. Why do you care? I mean, why are you telling me this? I asked. I just don't want anyone to ruin their marriage because they took a friend's bad advice, replied the woman I was talking to. You say Brenda has been showing more interest lately? How long have you been eavesdropping on their conversations? I was starting to see holes in her story, but I didn't want to turn it off just yet. I still needed to try and figure out who was playing me like this. It's been 6 or 7 weeks. What are you going to do about it? She asked. There it was. The hook. I wasn't ready to cut her off, but I wasn't going to bite her either. I don't know. I need to find out more about what's going on before I do anything. Can I call you if I need to? I asked. No, I'll call you if I think we need to talk again. I knew she would never give me her number, but I had to try. I felt like I only had one option. Either ignore the whole thing or pretend like I believed what she was telling me, hoping to find out who was calling and why someone was messing with me like this. Okay, you'll call me, I said. Please call. I hung up and sat for a minute, trying to comprehend the call. I knew that everything the caller had told me was bullshit. Brenda would never cheat on me. In our 13 years together, 2 years of dating and 11 years of marriage, Brenda had always been a faithful and devoted wife. She has never given me any reason to doubt her love for me and seems to constantly find new ways to demonstrate how much she loves me. For my part, I can honestly say that I have been just as faithful and devoted to her. There are 2 other reasons why I couldn't believe that Brenda could cheat on me. Kevin and Michelle are children. Kevin is 6 years old and Michelle is 8. I know Brenda would never do anything to hurt our children, so I knew it had to be all a sham. I had to put the call out of my mind and go to a 2-hour conference call. The problems identified in the conference call kept me occupied all afternoon, which helped me put the strange call out of my mind while I was at work, but it was back at the forefront of my thoughts as I drove home that evening. As I left the office, I intended to tell Brenda about the call, but on the way home, I decided that wasn't the best course of action. I didn't want to worry Brenda unnecessarily. I would tell her everything once I figured out who was behind the joke, prank, or whatever it was. All that night, I pondered and reconsidered whether or not I should tell Brenda about the call. As it turned out, it didn't matter, as there was no opportunity to talk to Brenda that evening. Kevin and Michelle kept me busy helping them with their homework, and when they finally went to bed, I got a call from one of my project managers in California. While I was talking to him, Brenda came into my office and kissed me on the cheek, and then whispered that she was tired and was going to go to bed. By the time I picked up the phone, Brenda was already asleep. Thursday, I had a busy day and pushed all thoughts of the previous day's phone call out of my mind. At the beginning of the day, I wondered if I would get another call, but by lunchtime I had forgotten about it, and there was no call in the afternoon. I half expected the call on Friday, but when it didn't come, I just put it and the associated irritation out of my mind. Once I was able to put the call out of my mind, it just went to the back of my mind, and I didn't think of it until the following Wednesday. Wednesday morning went very well, and it seemed like the second half of the day would go smoothly as well. In the afternoon, Jake Peterson showed up at my office. Jake is the project manager in charge of the Northeast. We were discussing some common problems that arise in our projects and trying to find a common solution when my phone rang. "Mike Fulton here," I answered. "Hi, Mike, it's me again," came a familiar voice. "Hold on a minute, please," I said. "I have someone in my office." "Sure." "Jake, I have to take this call, do you mind?" I said. "No problem," Jake said, getting up and heading for the door. Just before he walked out, he turned around and said, "Is that your girlfriend?" And then laughed, closing the door behind him. "I'm back." "You didn't do anything, did you?" the voice asked. "What?" "You didn't do anything to stop your wife, did you?" The question caught me off guard, and it took me a moment to think of an answer. "I haven't decided how to feel about that yet," I said. "Is there anything else I should know?" "Have you forgotten that it's Wednesday?" "No," I replied, but the significance of the fact that it was Wednesday didn't come to me right away. "That's right. You remember that it's Wednesday, but you forgot that your wife had lunch with her girlfriends again today," the voice said. At those words, the muscles in my stomach involuntarily clenched. Trying to remain calm, I asked, "So, did you overhear their conversation today?" "Yes, and I'm telling you that you better decide what you're going to do soon, or it might be too late," she said. "Why do you say that?" "It wasn't Kara who brought up the affair today. It was your wife." It couldn't have been. I knew she would never do that. I was angry again. How was I going to figure all this out if I didn't find out who had called me? What did Brenda say? Your wife asked Kara if she'd gone on one of her secret dates in the last week. That doesn't mean Brenda wants to have an affair, I said. No, it doesn't mean that. But when Kara said she was on a date last night, your wife said she wanted to hear all the sordid details, she said. I didn't know how to respond to that. I tried to play the role of the suspicious husband, even though all I really wanted to do was find out who I was talking to. I tried to think of what I would say if I believed what this woman had told me. I'm sorry. I'm just having a hard time believing what you're telling me, I said. I know it's hard for you, but you have to believe what I'm telling you, or you're going to have a hard time later. Can we meet and talk about it? I asked hopefully. No, I'll call you, she said. You better fix this soon. The caller hung up before I could say anything else. I was too angry to have time to do much work after the call, so I went home early. Brenda has late nights on Wednesdays. By late nights, I don't mean late at night. On Wednesdays, Brenda picks up Michelle and Kevin from school. She drives Kevin home to his mom's house and takes Michelle to a brownie meeting. Brenda is the assistant troop leader, so she stays for all the meetings. After the meeting, she picks Kevin up, and the three of them get home around 6 o'clock. That Wednesday, I got home at 3:30 p.m. and went to my office. I pulled out a notepad and began to analyze the problem. As a project manager, I am responsible for keeping my projects on track. When a problem arises in a project, the first thing I do is grab a notepad and a pencil and start taking the problem apart, analyzing it until I know the cause and how to fix it. This is the only way I knew how to solve problems, so it was the way I chose to solve this new problem. I began by summarizing what the caller had told me. Kara is bragging about her affairs. She's trying to talk Brenda into having an affair. Brenda doesn't agree, but shows some interest. These conversations have been going on for 6 or 7 weeks. Next, I made a list of reasons why I thought this story was fake. 1. Brenda would never cheat on me. 2. I have known Kara as long as I have known Brenda, and I don't believe she would cheat on her husband John. 3. I knew that Brenda and Kara met for lunch once a week, but it had been so long since Brenda had said anything about those lunches that it was doubtful that they still met weekly. 4. The caller mentioned a third person named Francis. Brenda never mentioned anyone named Francis. 5. The caller said she sat at the table next to the three of them for 6 or 7 weeks in a row. I found this very hard to believe. The idea of 3 women always sitting at the same table and my caller managing to take the table next to them every week seemed implausible to me. 6. Brenda is a very observant person. She noticed that the same person was always sitting next to them and also noticed that this person seemed to be listening to their conversation. If she thought someone was eavesdropping on them, Brenda would put a stop to it by either changing where they were sitting or going to another restaurant for lunch. Next, I made a list of all the explanations for the call that I could think of. 1. A practical joke by one of my friends. 2. A practical joke by one of Brenda's friends 3. A nasty prank by one of my enemies 4. A nasty prank by one of Brenda's enemies 5. A nasty prank by my old girlfriend 6. A nasty prank by Brenda's old boyfriend 7. Some guy is in love with Brenda and wants to break us up 8. Some girl is in love with me and wants to break us up 9. As an addition to numbers 7 and 8, it could be a woman in love with Brenda or a man in love with me, just trying to cover all the bases. 10. We're just a random target for someone's successful joke 11. We're a target for a TV reality show that pranks people to capture their reactions for a TV program. This was a long shot, but I ran out of ideas. There were 7 or 8 other items on the list that were just as absurd as the TV reality program, which I no longer remember. The last item on the list was, the caller told the truth and Brenda is thinking about having an affair. I spent the next hour thinking about each possibility and rearranging the list, moving the most unlikely options to the bottom of the list and the most likely options to the top. I quickly ruled out the possibility of a prank by my friends or Brenda. None of our friends liked pranks and would never do anything so sneaky. Nasty pranks from enemies didn't fit either. I didn't have anyone I considered an enemy. I knew there were people who might not like me, but I had never treated someone so badly that they would do something like that to me. I was just as sure that Brenda didn't have enemies like that. Old girlfriends? I'd had 2 girlfriends before I met Brenda, and neither of them had ended badly. I only knew one of Brenda's boyfriends, but they had stopped dating more than a year before I met Brenda. A gay or lesbian crush didn't seem like a possibility to me either. I went through the list 4 times, making sure I considered every possible factor. When I was done, a television reality show topped the list, followed by the theory that the caller was telling the truth and Brenda was thinking about having an affair. I wasn't happy with the results and didn't believe they were correct. I knew there was no such thing as a television reality show. It just wasn't plausible, but then none of the other possibilities were plausible either. This brought me back to the core problem. The caller was either telling the truth or she wasn't. If she was lying, then why did she do it, and who else was involved? If she was telling the truth, which I still did not believe, my marriage was in big trouble. To determine where the truth lay, I had to ask Brenda some questions. And I had to do it in a way that wouldn't make Brenda suspicious. If she was innocent, as I believed, it would hurt her to think that I might not trust her. On the other hand, if the caller was telling the truth and Brenda suspected that I was questioning her, she might have guessed that I knew something. If that happened, I'd never know the truth. It might stop Brenda from having an affair, but I would never know if she was really thinking about having an affair or not. In order not to make Brenda suspicious, I had to pry information out of her little by little. When I heard the garage door open, I destroyed my notes and went out to the kitchen to greet my children and wife as they entered the house. As soon as the kitchen door opened, Kevin ran up to me, clapped me on the hip and said, "Hi, Dad, can I go watch TV?" "Yeah." "Dad, look what I made at Brownies today," Michelle shouted, running up to me to show me the pins she had glued little candles to. "These are for making a fire in the fireplace. You light the candle, and then the pin lights up. Isn't that a good idea?" "That's a great idea, honey. We can use them this winter when we use the fireplace," I said. Michelle's face lit up, showing that she was pleased with my answer, and then she ran off to join her brother in front of the TV. 45 minutes later, the 4 of us were sitting at the dinner table eating spaghetti. "How was your day?" asked Brenda. "Pretty much the same as any other day. My projects have been going pretty smoothly the last few months, so I haven't had to put out any fires," I said. "If you need to start a fire, you can use one of my pins, Daddy," Michelle said, giggling. "That's what I'll do, Shell. Next time I want to light one of my projects on fire, I'll use one of your pins." Michelle laughed and poked some spaghetti on her fork. I turned to Brenda and asked, "Have you seen Kara lately?" "I had lunch with her today," she replied. "Why?" "Really? I didn't know you were still doing that," I said. "We still have lunch together every Wednesday, but why did you ask if I'd seen her?" "It's just that you haven't mentioned her in a while, and we haven't seen Kara and John in almost a year. I just thought we should go out to dinner with them sometime," I said. "Do you want to do it this weekend?" "I'll call Kara and ask her," Brenda said. "Why not? It would be great to see the 2 of them together again." I found out that Brenda and Kara still meet for lunch every week, so I decided to risk digging deeper. "So you still meet for lunch every week. Where do you go?" "We go to Vinny's. It's a little Italian restaurant in a shopping center on Appian Way." I knew where that mall was. There was a big supermarket, a pharmacy, a few small specialty stores, a coffee shop, and a Domino's pizzeria. I hadn't been to this part of town in years, so I had never heard of Vinny's. "Do you always go to the same place?" I asked. "Yes, they have good food and it's not expensive. Most of their lunches are takeout, so it's easy to get a table, the service is fast, and it's the most convenient place for the 3 of us to meet," she said. A sour feeling rumbled in my stomach. So far, everything I'd learned matched what the caller had told me. A threesome? I thought it was just you and Kara, I said. Kara's college roommate started working with Kara about a year ago and comes over for lunch every week. Do I know her? I asked. I don't think you've ever met Frances. She was Kara's roommate for 2 years, but she had already graduated before you met Kara and me. So the three of you go out to lunch every week. Maybe I'll join you sometime, I said, watching Brenda to see her reaction to that. That would be great. We'd love for you to join us. Yeah, sure. The chickens want the registry to join them for lunch. Aren't you going to lunch to complain about your husbands? Of course, yes. But I'm going to complain about you to your face, so it doesn't matter if you're there or not, Brenda said, laughing at me. After dinner, I helped Brenda clean up the kitchen, and then we put the kids to bed. This is the best part of my day. I sit on the couch in front of the TV, and Brenda sits next to me and puts her head on my shoulder. This goes on for about half an hour, and then Brenda stretches her legs out on the couch and rests her head on my lap. I gently run my fingers through her hair and face until she falls asleep. I really like it when she lies on my lap, and I can just stare at her while she sleeps. That night, I didn't get that pleasure. A seed of doubt started in my brain, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't keep it from growing. Thursday turned out to be a difficult one for me. Every time the phone rang, I wondered if my caller was calling again, but the only calls I received that day were business-related. One of the calls was from my project manager in Denver. We were in the process of migrating a network for a large corporation headquartered there. The project had been going on for over a year, but things were going very well so far. Tom, the project manager, called and asked if I would come in for a quarterly review of the project with the customer. I told Tom that I would call the VP of IT and set up a meeting in about 2 weeks. I had a good relationship with the VP and was looking forward to traveling there for the review. The trip was usually 4 days long. I would leave on the morning of the first day, meet with Tom, and familiarize myself with the schedule and status of the project. Tom would bring me up to speed on any problems or issues and anything he wanted me to discuss in a meeting with the VP. The next day, I would meet with Tom's team and get their input. On the third day, I would meet with the vice president. This meeting usually lasted an hour and then ended with a round of golf and dinner that evening. The fourth day was to return home to Richmond. In the evening, Brenda told me that we were going to have dinner with Kara and John on Saturday, and we fell into our usual evening routine. Friday was a busy day. I had 3 conference calls, and then there was a problem with my project in Tulsa. I spent most of the day on the phone with the customer, assuring them that the problem would be fixed by the end of the day and that the project would be completed on time. By the time I got home Friday night, Wednesday's call was far from my thoughts. When I entered the house, Brenda met me at the door with a kiss. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, she said. The kids are playing upstairs, so we have time to sit and have a quiet drink before we eat. What would you like? A cold beer in a frosted mug is what I fantasized about on the way home. Sit down and I'll bring it to you. There was nothing unusual about this behavior. Brenda had always treated me that way. I never took it for granted and always found ways to repay her in kind. I was sitting in my favorite chair when she brought the drinks into the family room. Brenda set the drinks on the coffee table and then walked around to my chair. Brenda whispered, "I was thinking about you today." I knew exactly what Brenda meant. Our sex life after 11 years of marriage was still good. So we had a little fun, and then I got up and asked Brenda if she wanted some wine. She agreed, and I poured us both a glass. As we sat there sipping our wine, Brenda looked at me with her big brown eyes. "Mike, I've been thinking about this for the past few weeks. What do you think about the idea of having another baby?" she asked. "Are you serious?" "Yes. I'm 33 years old, and I don't think I want to risk getting pregnant in 2 or 3 years," she said. "Kevin is going to be 7 in a couple of months, and I feel like if we're ever going to do it, we should do it now." If you're sure that's what you want, then sure we can do it, I said. Then we're in agreement. I can stop taking the pill tomorrow and start trying to get pregnant? I kissed her nose and said, Yes, and I think we should practice a little more tonight, don't you? Absolutely, she replied. Boy or girl, she said. What? Do you want a boy or a girl? How about one of each, said I. Come on, be serious. Do you want a boy or a girl? She asked. Honestly, I don't know. I'd be happy just to have another healthy baby, said I. Brenda said, That's the right answer. That night, as Brenda fell asleep, I lay awake and thought about having another baby and then went back to the phone calls. If Brenda was contemplating an affair, she certainly wouldn't have gone on the pill to get pregnant. This was further evidence in favor of the calls being a hoax. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed that Brenda had indeed had an affair and gotten pregnant. When I woke up and realized it was just a dream, I was greatly relieved, but at the same time, a black cloud began to form in my thoughts. And I thought about telling Brenda about the phone calls again, but decided against it. It occurred to me that if I told her about the calls, it could easily set off a chain of events that would prevent me from ever finding out what was wrong. I knew that if I told Brenda, she would tell Kara, and who would Kara tell? I could only guess. I figured it wouldn't immediately reach the perpetrator that I told Brenda about the call, and that I hadn't fallen for the scheme, whatever it was, and that would be the end of it. But there was still a small chance that the caller was telling the truth. I needed to know. I couldn't let it end there. I had to know the truth. There were no more calls that week, but that didn't help me. I was starting to get stressed about the mystery of the calls. Saturday night, as Brenda and I were getting dressed to go out to dinner with Kara and John, I was hoping I would get some stress relief, but I didn't know how it would happen. That night, the four of us had a wonderful time. The food was delicious, and the conversation was interesting and enjoyable. I discreetly observed Kara and John's interactions, but saw nothing that would lead me to think that Kara was cheating on him. Despite the pleasant evening when we got home, I still couldn't figure out what was going on. There were no visible problems between John and Kara. Kara and Brenda didn't look like they had any dark secrets they were keeping from John and me. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. I felt myself sinking into depression until Brenda kissed my ear and said, I've been thinking about you today. It's time to go make a baby. And I followed her to our room where I did my best to make the baby. As soon as we were done, Brenda said, You do realize it's too early for me to get pregnant, don't you? I only stopped taking the pill 2 days ago. I know, I said. Why don't we try again tomorrow night? Brenda replied, Sure, and kissed me. It was Monday morning, and I was sitting at my desk when a thought struck me. If my caller was at the restaurant where Brenda went to have lunch with Kara on Wednesdays, all I had to do was go to the restaurant on Wednesday and see who it was. I had to think it over carefully before I did anything about it. I kind of threatened to show up for lunch sometime, and Brenda acted like that would be fine. So if I just showed up at the restaurant, it wouldn't cause her any alarm. The problem was that if the caller saw me before I could identify her, she'd disappear and I'd lose my chance. I didn't know if the caller knew what I looked like. It was entirely possible that she did and would have noticed me if I had been near that restaurant. On Monday, I took a long lunch, drove to Appian Way, and stopped by Winnie's. There was no way I would have been able to get inside Winnie's unnoticed, but there was a spot in the parking lot across the street from Winnie's where I could park my car. There was part of a fence that blocked most of my car from view, but allowed me to observe the restaurant. Monday night, I put the binoculars in my car so I wouldn't forget them on Wednesday. Tuesday was a very busy day. I managed to keep myself busy with work, but I hated that I had to wait until Wednesday to do something about my problem. I left the office at 11 a.m. Wednesday morning and drove to the parking lot across the street from Winnie's. Fortunately, a spot behind the fence appeared to be vacant, and I parked there. After looking around to make sure no one was paying attention to me, I pulled out my binoculars and surveyed the view. Through the binoculars, I could see the front of the restaurant window. The problem was that the sun's glare on the window made it hard to see the restaurant from the inside. There was nothing left for me to do but wait, so I pulled out the sandwich and soda I had brought with me and ate my lunch. At 12:05, I saw Brenda, Kara, and another woman I mistook for Frances enter Winnie's. I pulled out my binoculars and pointed them at the window. I could make out the three of them sitting down at a table. More accurately, they were sitting at a table by the window. The caller was right. The table next to them I didn't get a good look at, but it didn't look like anyone was sitting there. For the next 45 minutes, I watched the entrance to the restaurant carefully, and although a lot of people were coming in, most of them were leaving with takeout orders after only a few minutes. As far as I could tell, no one sat down at the table next to Brenda and her friends. I waited until they left and watched to see if anyone came out after them. No one came out. And this made me wonder if my companion was here for lunch today, or perhaps she had spotted me and left before I could see her. I had to hurry back to the office to be there in case she called. I wanted her to think that I had followed my usual routine and ate in my office, although there was no reason to believe that she could have known about my routine. Just as I entered my office, the phone rang. "Hello, Apex Office Integrators. This is Mike Fulton speaking." "Mike, I'm starting to worry about you," the voice said. "You still haven't done anything to stop your wife." "How do you know I haven't done anything?" "I know that because of what your wife said at lunch today," she replied. "Did you listen to their conversation again today?" "Of course. What else do I have for entertainment? You'd better start listening to me. I like eavesdropping on their conversations, but I don't like giving you this bad news." "Then why did you call me?" "I guess I feel better about eavesdropping on their conversations. If I can help you, then maybe I'm not such a bad person," she said. "Either way, the situation is approaching a dangerous point." "What exactly does that mean?" "It means that today, your wife told her friend that the next time you have to go out of town for work, she's going to have her little affair. It got to the point where Kara suggested a double date and said she knew the right guys to go out with." I could feel the tension building and growing up my spine. I didn't know what to say or do. I still couldn't believe that my wife could think of cheating on me, but the story I was being told was beginning to seem plausible. My musings were interrupted by a voice in the phone receiver. "Well, are you going to do something to stop this, or are you just going to leave it alone? If you're not going to do anything, tell me now so I can stop worrying about you." "I'll take care of it," I said, and put the phone down hard. I thought about everything I had been told over and over again, and by the time I got home, I was sure I had a problem, but I still wasn't sure if my wife was the problem. I was about to convince myself that I was right and that Brenda was innocent of what my interlocutor was saying about her. But then I was hit over the head like a sledgehammer. At dinner, as I was asking the kids about their day at school, Brenda asked a question that made my blood run cold. "Don't you have a trip to Denver planned?" I had planned a trip for next week, but because of all the other worries, I had forgotten to tell Brenda about it. What really alarmed me was the timing of the question. The caller said that Brenda had told Kara that she was having an affair the next time I went out of town, and here she was asking me if I was going to Denver soon. Coincidence? I didn't know what to think. I was trying like hell to put the thought out of my mind when Brenda asked me if we were going to work on making a baby that night. In the end, I had to tell Brenda that I wasn't feeling well. Thursday morning, I made a decision to do something I never thought I would do. I made an appointment with a private investigator. I arranged to meet with him Friday morning, and then I called my client in Denver and postponed my trip for a week. I had to get this mess over with before I left for Denver. In the evening, I pulled some pictures out of one of our albums to give to the investigator. Friday morning at 9:30, I walked into the AAA detective agency. I had better not think that AAA had anything to do with the quality of their work. They chose that name to be near the top of the list of detective agencies in the phone book. It worked. They were third on the list. They got my business because I never call the first agency I see, and the second one doesn't answer the phone. I was escorted to Brian Dunstan's office, where I spent 20 minutes explaining to him exactly what I wanted him to do, and then handed him the photos. "A good-looking woman," he said. The way he said it made me cringe. I already had a pretty low opinion of him. I didn't think much of a man who made his living by hurting others. Spying on cheating spouses was not a profession I could respect. "Yes, it is," I replied sharply. "Now let me read my instructions again. First of all, you must be inconspicuous. I don't want her to know you're following her." "No problem, Mr. Fulton," he said. "We're professionals here. She won't know we're following her. If you find out she's seeing someone and she's having an affair or affairs, I want proof. Photos, videos, or voice recordings, I don't care, as long as they clearly prove what she's doing." "Don't worry about a thing, Mr. Fulton. If she's fooling around, we'll get proof." "I want any evidence you get by next Thursday," I said. "I understand. Why don't you come back next Thursday around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we'll give you everything we've been able to uncover." "Okay, next Thursday at 3. I'll see you then," I said. As I left Mr. Dunstan's office, I felt uneasy. The next few days flew by. I managed to make sure that Brenda didn't notice that anything was wrong. I didn't want her to think I suspected anything, and I certainly didn't want to upset the kids. I was proud of myself when I managed to make love to Brenda 4 nights out of 7. Wednesday afternoon, I sat in my office waiting for the phone to ring. At 1:30 p.m., the phone rang. "Have you done anything yet?" she asked as soon as I said hello. "I have everything in hand," I replied. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. All I can tell you is that it will be over by this weekend." She tried to ask me more, but I told her that was all I could say and hung up. At 3 o'clock on Thursday afternoon, I was sitting in Brian Dunstan's office at the AAA Detective Agency. "Mr. Fulton, I have what I believe is bad news for you. We caught her in the act and we have evidence to back it up," he said. Mr. Dunstan held out the DVD to me. "It's all recorded here, and it can all be admitted in court. All the video on this DVD was shot in public. There are no hidden cameras in homes or hotel rooms here. We have a DVD player in the next room if you want to watch the video right now," he said. "I'll take it with me and watch it in private if you don't mind. If you give me a bill, I'll pay for it on the way out." Back in my office, I locked the door again, loaded the DVD into my laptop, and pressed play. Dunstan was right. All the evidence was there. In the first scene, time-stamped Monday at 9 p.m., she was sitting in a booth at some bar with a man. The man had his arms around her neck. They kissed several times and then got up to dance. On the dance floor, they were completely engrossed in each other. The next scene moved to 10:15 that evening, and it showed her getting into a car with the same guy. The next scene was at 11:05 and showed the two of them entering a motel room at the downtown Ramada Inn. At 1:25 a.m., they left the room and went back to the bar where she got into her car and drove home. The next episode occurred Wednesday morning at 9:07. She was with another guy, sitting in a restaurant eating breakfast. In the next scene, the detective was chasing a car that apparently belonged to this guy. At first, I didn't think she was in the car with him, as her head wasn't visible above the seat, but then her head appeared as the car turned into the parking lot of an abandoned warehouse. In the next scene, the car is shown some distance from the camera. It was too far away to see if anyone was in the car. Then the camera started zooming in, and I saw a guy having fun in the back seat. It was all I could take. I downloaded the video to my hard drive, then copied it to a blank DVD and erased the file. I put the DVD in a protective sleeve and then slipped it into a large manila envelope. I put the original DVD in the safe in my office and went to fulfill my devil's errand. That evening, I got home about 20 minutes before Brenda. As soon as the door from the garage to the kitchen opened, Kevin and Michelle piled into the house without even bothering to say hello to me. Behind them, smiling, Brenda walked in. "You're back early today," she said. "Just getting ready to make a baby today." Brenda laughed. "Good, because I've been thinking about you all day," she said. "Did you get the mail?" "No, I forgot. I'll go and get it now." Sit down, I'll get it, she said. I wouldn't want your little boys to get tired and not do their chores. Brenda returned to the house with the usual array of credit card offers, real estate listings, and other junk mail. Along with all of this, she had a large manila envelope. Brenda quickly went through the mail and dumped everything but the large envelope on the coffee table. Brenda handed me the large envelope and said, "Addressed to you, no return address." I didn't say anything back. I just took the envelope from her, placed it on the table next to me, and said, "How about a beer?" "I'd love one." I got up, went to the kitchen, got 2 beers, and brought them back. I held one out to Brenda and then sat back down on the couch. We talked about work for a few minutes, and then Brenda said, "Aren't you curious about what's in this envelope?" "It's probably just junk mail," I said. "I know, but why don't you open it anyway?" she suggested. And I took the envelope and started to open the flap as the phone suddenly rang. Brenda jumped up and answered it, and as I sat there looking at Brenda, I heard the first part of her conversation, at least her part of the conversation. "Hello?" The usual beginning. "Oh, hi. What, are you serious? Just a minute." At this point, Brenda walked off into the kitchen, and I couldn't make out what else she was saying. The call didn't last more than 10 minutes, and as soon as it was over, Brenda came back into the living room and said that she needed to meet Kara, that it was urgent. "Urgent? What kind of urgent?" I asked. "I don't know exactly. Kara was too upset to talk on the phone. Can you feed the kids and put them to bed?" "Sure, I've done it before, you know that." "I know. I'm sorry, I'm just worried and upset." Brenda grabbed her purse and keys and headed out the door. "I'll be back as soon as I can," she said. "Don't worry about me. Take care of Kara," I said. After Brenda left, I walked into the family room where Kevin and Michelle were watching TV. "Mom had to go away for a while, so I'm going to have to feed you. You have 2 choices. I can make liver and onions, or we can go to McDonald's." "It's your choice," I said. Kevin started yelling, "McDonald's! McDonald's! McDonald's!" Michelle, with her usual sense of humor, said, That's a tough choice. You know how much I love liver, but I'm sure you'd rather not cook, so I'm going to McDonald's to make it easier for you." I picked Michelle up in my arms, swirled her over my head, set her on the floor, and started tickling her. "You're such a silly baby," I said. Kevin didn't want to be left out and pulled my hand. "It's my turn. I want to fly like Michelle." I let Kevin ride and then tickled him too. The 3 of us went to McDonald's and were home in less than an hour. Then I sent them upstairs to get ready for bed. By 8 o'clock, they were tucked into their beds. Kevin was already asleep, and I sat on the edge of Michelle's bed and listened while she told me about what had happened at school that day. When she finished her story, I kissed her forehead and turned off the light. I then went downstairs and got a beer. As I sat down on the couch, I took a long sip of the beer, then took a large envelope and opened it. I dumped the contents of the envelope onto the coffee table. In the envelope were 2 copies of the itinerary for my trip to Denver, airline tickets, a hotel reservation, and a rental car reservation. I took 1 copy of the itinerary and hung it on the refrigerator with a magnet in the shape of a bunch of bananas. I put the rest of the papers in my briefcase and then picked up Sports Illustrated magazine and started reading. By the time Brenda got home, it was almost midnight, and I could see that she was very worried about what had happened to Kara. "What happened?" I asked. "Huh? What happened to Kara?" "Let me have a beer and then I'll tell you what happened," she said. "Do you want to?" "Yes." Brenda came back with the beer and sat down next to me on the couch. "Okay, let's start over. What happened to Kara?" I asked. Brenda took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "John kicked her out of the house tonight." "What? What did John do?" When Kara got home from work at 6:30 p.m., John was already waiting for her. He had already packed a bag for her, threw her out the door, and told her to come with her. Oh my God, I can't believe this. Does John have another woman, and that's why he kicked her out? I asked. No, of course not. You know John, he would never do that. I was quiet for a minute, and then I whispered, It's Kara. She had another man. Is that what this is about? Brenda looked down at the floor and replied, Yes, John found out she was fooling around. Jesus, what's the matter with her? She was married to a great guy. I thought she loved him. She loves him, Brenda said. If she loves him, how could she cheat on him? I don't know. I don't know why she did it, she said. I feel so sorry for her. You feel sorry for her? What about John? She cheated on him. I know, but he didn't have to kick her out of the house. He hit him too. I didn't like that. Hit him? He called her a whore and punched her in the face. That's it? I asked. What do you mean that's all? He slapped her. He shouldn't have done that, she said. Are you taking her side? She cheated on him. You know how much he loved her. It must have hurt him terribly. If it had happened to me, I would have done the same thing, maybe worse. I love you more than anything in the world, but if you had ever hurt me like that, I don't think I would have handled it any better than John did. I'm not taking her side. I just think John should have given her time to talk to him about it. What is there to talk about? You mean John should have given her time to make up a lie to tell him about why she cheated on him, I said. Why are you so angry about this? Asked Brenda. I'm angry because I feel John's pain. I bet if John had cheated, you wouldn't be so favorable to him. Brenda started to say something but stopped. You're Kara's best friend. You have lunch with her every week. Did you even know she was cheating on John? What? Why are you asking me that? What do you mean by that? Hissed Brenda. Brenda, you've always been honest with me. Please don't start lying to me now. Did you know Kara was having affairs with other men? Brenda couldn't look at me and then meekly replied, Yes. And for how long? A few months. Did you try to stop her? How? Did you try at all? I persisted. No. Then you were an enabler. By not trying to stop her, you were actually encouraging her, I said. No. I wasn't encouraging her. I didn't like what she was doing. I just didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. So you're partly to blame for what happened today, said I. I surprised myself at how angry I was with Brenda at that moment. How can you say it's my fault? I didn't tell her to cheat on John. But you never did anything to stop her from cheating, and now that she's been caught, you took her side. I don't think I know you anymore. Haven't you always talked about how important fidelity is in marriage? Does that only apply to husbands, or does it not apply to your close friends? Kara made a mistake. She's my friend, and I have to support her. She's in a lot of pain. What about John? Don't you think he's hurting? What Kara did isn't just about her and John. Look what she's doing to us right now, I said, and got up from the couch. I'm going to bed. Brenda didn't say a word. I lay in bed for a while thinking about how we had just had a fight with Brenda. I was angry at her for not noticing the damage Kara had done, and angry at myself for getting angry. At least this situation would give Brenda something to think about. Any thoughts of having an affair to brighten her life now had to go away. When Brenda came to bed a half hour later, I pretended to be asleep so as not to talk to her. The next few days were a little chilly in our house. Monday morning, I caught a plane to Denver. I decided I wouldn't call Brenda on Monday, and she called me at 9 o'clock, 11 her time in Richmond. Why didn't you call me when you got there? She asked. I didn't think you wanted to talk to me. Brenda was silent for a moment, then said, I don't care what you thought. You should have called me. Okay, I'm sorry I didn't call. It won't happen again. We only talked for about 5 minutes. Brenda said she had to make sure I got to Denver, okay, before she went to bed. She then told me to call early and talk to the kids the next day. The next few days, Brenda was more friendly when I talked to her. We both avoided the topic of Kara and John. My flight home on Thursday was due a little after 7 o'clock in the evening. Before leaving Denver, I called Brenda and told her what time I would be home. Can you grab a bite to eat on the way home? She asked. I'm picking up the kids to have dinner with my parents, and you won't make it in time for dinner. No problem. I'll see you at home. My flight arrived on time, and I decided to stop by a familiar little grill bar that served great burgers. When I walked in, I saw John at the bar counter getting himself a drink. I decided to talk to him and see how he was doing. And when I caught up with him, he had already moved to a booth and to my surprise was sitting with a woman I didn't know. Hey, John, how are you doing? Mike, it's good to see you. I'm doing well. As good as can be expected under the circumstances, he said. Mike, this is my friend Fanny. Fanny, Mike. Nice to meet you, Fanny, I said. If it wasn't for Fanny, I might have gone completely off the rails over this, John said. In that case, it's really nice to meet you, I said to Fanny. Mike, we're just having a drink before we head out to dinner. Why don't you have a drink and join us? I ordered a beer and pulled a chair to the outside of the booth. We didn't talk about Kara and what she'd done. John talked about Fanny most of the time. He said he'd known her since college. He talked about how they went to college, and then he asked me about Brenda and the kids. After about 20 minutes, John said he needed to go to the bathroom. When he came out from behind the table, Fanny smiled at me. Fanny? I suppose that's a nickname. I believe your name is Francis, am I right? You're right. I must say you've done a good job, Fanny said. That's what I do. I'm a problem solver, said I. So, how long have you been in love with John? Since I met him in college. You were Kara's roommate then, weren't you? Yeah, you're good. So you used me to get rid of Kara, I said. Yes. I'm sorry, but I couldn't do it on my own. I didn't want her to know I betrayed her, and I didn't want to be the one who had to tell John that his wife was cheating on him. Do you feel good about what you did? I don't feel bad. Look, if Kara hadn't started cheating on John, I would have been on the back burner forever. I would never have done anything to hurt either of them. But when she started bragging about cheating on John, I had to put a stop to it, and why wouldn't I help myself to that? But why did you bring Brenda and me into it? There was no one else. I'm sorry I dragged you into it, but I just couldn't let her let what she was doing to him go unpunished, Fanny said. How did you know I would warn John about Kara's cheating? I asked. I've been having lunch with your wife every week for over a year now. She talks about you all the time. She painted a pretty clear picture of a man with high moral standards, and I knew from her description that you would put an end to Kara's cheating one way or another, and I was sure John would eventually find out the truth. It was a real streak of genius to do everything anonymously. John believes that the wife of one of Kara's friends hired a detective to spy on him and then sent the photos to John. I think I have one more question for you, I said. You lied about Brenda being interested in the affair, didn't you? Yes. I had to say that to engage you in conversation. The thing is, Brenda was very upset about it, but I never said anything to her about it. Brenda and I had talked about it several times. Brenda kept hoping that Kara would come to her senses and stop fooling around. I never told Brenda about it, but I was hoping John would catch her. So Kara never tried to convince Brenda to try fooling around? I inquired. Actually, Kara suggested it once, but Brenda made it clear she would never do it. That's when I got the idea to call you. I twisted things around a bit, but at the heart of it was Kara's suggestion, Fanny said. I wasn't sure if I hated Fanny or admired her courage. She had found a way to warn John about Kara's cheating, and then stood by his side to ease his pain. Before I could say anything else to Fanny, I spotted John coming back from the restroom. We finished our drinks, and just before they left, John turned to me and said, I don't know what the future holds for us, but I hope you and Brenda will still consider me a friend. I'm sure we will, John. It was a pleasure to meet you, Mike, Fanny said, and a sly smile appeared on her face. Likewise, I said. When they left, I ordered a cheeseburger and fries and another beer. As I sat there eating my dinner, a strange feeling came over me. It was sort of euphoric, and it took me a few minutes to realize why I felt that way. All the tension of the past few weeks was gone. Although I kept telling myself that I didn't believe Brenda would ever cheat on me, some part of me worried that she might. When Fanny told me that Brenda had never shown any interest in a loving relationship, and in fact made it clear that she would never do it, the significance of it didn't come to me right away. It hit me immediately. It was the best cheeseburger of my life. As soon as I finished my dinner, I called Brenda to tell her I was on my way home. Brenda replied that she was just about ready to leave her parents' house and would see me home in about a half hour. Suddenly, half an hour seemed like an eternity to me. I arrived home 15 minutes before Brenda. I was so excited about talking to Fanny that I couldn't sit down. My head was buzzing with a rush of emotions. I needed to apologize to Brenda for the way I acted the night John kicked Kara out of the house. I wanted to hold Brenda close to me and tell her I loved her. I wanted to make love to her. I wanted to grab her as soon as she walked through the door and make love to her on the kitchen floor. But I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't do any of that until the kids were asleep. It suddenly dawned on me that Brenda had been angry with me when I left for Denver. I wondered if she was still angry. This homecoming might not have happened the way I wanted it to. I could end up spending the whole evening trying to get Brenda to forgive me for being so hard on her, for not trying to intervene with Kara and stop her from ruining her marriage. I thought about how the married guys I worked with bragged about their adventures while on business trips. I didn't approve of their behavior, but I never said anything. I guess I was as much of an indulger as Brenda had been with Kara. The only reason I was so hard on Brenda was because I was trying to use what had happened to Kara as a warning to her that if she cheated on me, she could expect nothing better than what had happened to Kara. Finding out ex post facto that Brenda had never thought about cheating, I couldn't justify my behavior. I could never tell Brenda the truth about why I had done what I did, so I had to hope that she would accept my apology and forgive me. Another problem I had to face was how I solved my problem. I hired a detective to follow Kara and get proof of her infidelity and then deliver it to John's house. I destroyed their marriage to save my own. John found out the truth about Kara, and she got what she deserved, but I'm not sure my path was the right one. Maybe I should have gone to Kara and explained everything to her. Suddenly, I said out loud what I was thinking. I acted selfishly to save my marriage, and I would do it again. I feel sorry for John, but it's not my fault that Kara cheated on him, and there's no reason to believe she would ever stop. I was sitting on the couch in the living room when I heard the garage door open and contemplated whether to wait where I was or run out to the kitchen to meet Brenda and the kids when they came into the house. I decided to wait on the couch. When the kitchen door opened, I didn't hear the sudden noise I was expecting. Michelle and Kevin never enter the house quietly. I waited another minute for the kids to run into the living room, but it didn't happen. I turned to look toward the kitchen and saw Brenda standing in the doorway. "Where are the kids?" I asked. "They're spending the night at my parents' house. Tomorrow is a teacher work day at school, so the kids won't be going to school," Brenda explained. Brenda was wearing a white skirt and a red blouse. I always liked Brenda in red. "You look nice," I said. "Thanks. I know you like that red blouse on me. That's why I'm wearing it." Suddenly, I had a feeling that everything was going to be okay. Brenda walked over and stood in front of me. "I have something to tell you," she said, "so please don't interrupt me. I've been thinking a lot about what you said to me last week, and now I realize what you meant. I had to do something to stop Kara. I think I knew from the beginning that her games would end this way. I feel really guilty about that. I'm sorry I argued with you about it. Brenda, you don't need to apologize to me. I overreacted too. Kara was your best friend, and you didn't know how to handle her cheating on John. In hindsight, I'm not sure what I would have done better if our roles had been reversed. I think this situation was more emotionally intense because both John and Kara were our friends. My anger and frustration came from what Kara did to John, but it was directed at you, which is unfair. But I think you did the same thing and directed your frustration at me. What happened to John and Kara is very sad, but we can't let it become our problem." I held out my hand to Brenda and she walked over to me. "I love you so much. I tried to be mad at you, but when you didn't call me on Monday, it almost broke my heart. Then I realized that you just said it was their problem, and we can't make it our own," Brenda said. "Besides, we have our own problem to solve," I said. Brenda pulled away from me and looked me in the eye. "What problem do we have to solve?" she asked. How can I get you pregnant if I don't make love to you? The expression on Brenda's face softened and turned into a beautiful smile. Well then, Buster, you'd better start making love to me, she said. And so we did. When I woke up in the morning, Brenda was already downstairs. I pulled on shorts and a t-shirt and headed downstairs for a cup of coffee. Well, we couldn't do it again that night or the next few nights. The kids, work, parental visits, everything conspired against us. But a few weeks later, we found out Brenda was pregnant. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.